am so sorry. Whew, I am way late today. Well, half hour. I decided I was going to go early and get all my grocery shopping done, Christmas stuff. I don't want to deal with crowds later this week. I have a busy week ahead. And so that was fun. And then on my way home, it started snowing. So glad I went. Yay, snow, I guess. Whatever. I could take it or leave it. Don't care. All right, we're going to go. Final day. Shanda Vander Ark. If you have not been watching this trial, she is on trial for allegedly torturing and unaliving her 15-year-old son, Timothy, along and kind of getting his brother Paul to follow her orders and partake in the things they were doing to him. He was, like I said, 15 years old. At the time of his death, he weighed 69 pounds. They fed him hot sauce, and I'm not talking Tabasco or Frank's. It was, you had to order it online. It was Carolina Reaper. I believe some kind of scorpion, something. I'm not up on my peppers. I have no idea. It was hot. They would put it on bread, force him to eat the bread. She would make him wait 30 minutes, which they didn't discuss, so I don't know. To me, I'm thinking maybe to make sure he kept it down, and then he would be allowed to eat bread. Had mostly bread and water. Was routinely given ice baths or cold baths. His ultimate cause of death, other than obviously starvation, was hypothermia, and he passed away in July in Michigan. He sat in a cold bath, I believe, for 6 hours. And his mom was accusing him of faking it, like faking not being able to walk, faking trembling, shaking, saying he was making his eyes all glassy on purpose. And the kid was dying, is what was happening. Even had his brother put him in the ice bath that final day, and told Paul, the brother, to go make a totino, like a pizza roll, and to hold it in front of Timothy. And if he tried to reach for it or to take a bite, to pull it back, because that would prove he was faking. This woman is messed up. She's extremely smart. We've heard all about how smart she is. Graduated second in her class at law school. Scored amazing on the LSAT. Passed the bar with a high score. We've heard how smart she is. But she just claimed that she did not see her son was wasting away in front of her. So she was on the stand when yesterday. This is a news station that's doing this, and they just pull their feed. I don't know if it's like 5 o'clock, they cut it off, whatever. We didn't get to see her attorney on redirect or recross, and the jury gets to ask questions in this case, in this trial. We also didn't get to see that. Sucks. So I have it set up, ready to go. The judge is in. I don't know if we're going straight to closing arguments or not. We will do closing arguments, and then I haven't watched the verdict, but I have it ready to go once closing arguments are over. So we'll go closing arguments straight into the verdict. I'm assuming it's not going to be good, and she's going to hopefully get what she deserves to get, which is to spend a lot of time in prison. Maybe just eating some bread and water. That would be perfect. So hopefully my sound is good. If it's not, please let me know. But let's get moving on this. And again, this news channel, glad they just, decided to air it. I just wish they would have aired it all. I really, really, really would have loved to see the jury questions. And maybe it's here. I don't know. I haven't watched any of this. I just have it up to where the judge comes out.
All right, we are back on the record in file 23110FC. People of the State of Michigan versus Shanda Vander Ark. This is day 4 of a jury trial. Record should reflect that Mr. Johnson is present in the courtroom representing Ms. Vander Ark. Mr. Roberts is here on behalf of the people of the State of Michigan. Ms. Vander Ark is not present. My understanding, Mr. Johnson, is that she is suffering some medical distress this morning. And,
I bet.
I know you want to put something on the record regarding that before we go forward, so you may proceed.
I do, Your Honor. My client is suffering a medical issue. We were hoping that, given some time this morning, we'd be able to get her to a point where she'd be able to come and join us. She'd be competent to do so. The court has been gracious for our trial that's supposed to start at 9 o'clock. It's now 10 minutes to 11. And we appreciate the court's grace in allowing us to work with her and hopefully get her to the point where she can come and participate in her own trial. I must report to the court at this point that situation has not occurred. That she at this point is not able to participate in trial given this medical situation. As a result of that, she's been basically, we've gone over a couple of options. One, ask to adjourn this case until a later date, but quite frankly, the situation that brought on this medical situation is occurring and is part of the stress of being on trial. So the reality is we couldn't guarantee the court that as of Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday of next week that we'd be in a different situation than they are in right now. And in fact, for the record, I anticipate we'd be right back to where we are right now, even if we waited a few days to work on things. Given that situation, I explained to my client around.
Okay, so I'm shaking my head. If you did not see her testimony, one, smartest woman apparently on the planet, has zero memory of anything, apparently. Also, when they showed her pictures of her son and the state he was in when he passed away, she threw up. The state called her out on it immediately. So my assumption, and only assumption on my part, because I don't know, we didn't get to see it, is that her redirect and recross and jury questions went very, very poorly for her. And she knows what's up. I wish we could have seen it. That is my assumption of why she's not here now. She's just, it's all about her. It is all about her. This is insane.
She could come up to the courtroom on her own volition or with assistance and participate in the hearing, or she could waive her right to be here and avoid this, and not avoid, but to not participate as we go forward. She has chosen the latter. She's chosen to waive her right to be here.
I think avoid was the word.
Not to come back again. She for this purpose. She is not requesting an iPad or any other aid to allow her to watch the proceedings from where she is. She is content to rest at this point and simply allow her legal team to go forward, representing her in this matter and concluding this particular trial. Therefore, I'm asking the court at this point to continue with the trial and without my client being present. Thank you.
I think she should have to watch.
Johnson,
Give her an iPad.
Too, as well as speaking to the deputies. I mean, I was asking, hey, what's going on with the progress, and they indicated that she had made some statements that she potentially could hurt herself. Is that correct? Your understanding?
I didn't hear them, but I heard those comments from a source that I rely on and have no basis to believe that's not accurate. And quite frankly, in conjunction with my experience with her this morning, I can see how she might have made those statements.
Okay, all right, so that was also a concern for the court as well. So, Mr. Roberts, any comments you wish to make on that?
I don't believe her.
The other thing I would ask, if we could at some point, and we don't necessarily have to do it right now, is because this is a critical stage of the proceedings, that we would have something at the time it becomes available, something in writing from her, waiving her right to be here. In terms of her not being present, we also have to address the fact that she did not answer the jurors' questions. I indicated in chambers that while I certainly recognize that the court rules do allow for jurors to ask questions here, that it is certainly not been a practice for a very long period of time, just recently adopted by the Supreme Court as a practice, and that I would think we could proceed without her present and without answering the jury's questions. I think we have to address it in some fashion for the jurors so they understand that, and they're obviously smart enough to look over the table and see that she's not here. But I don't believe that would in any way cause her testimony to be stricken here or allow the jury, put the jury in a position where they're not allowed to at least consider the testimony that has been given. It's probably frustrating for them, but quite frankly, a few of those questions were questions that weren't going to be able to be asked anyway because of different legal reasons. So I don't think there's anything here that we need to do in terms of, besides addressing it for the jury, however the court sees fit, and getting it in writing at this point.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, any objection to proceeding without the jury questions being asked? I know that I told both attorneys in chambers. It's a little bit frustrating to me because I think we told the jury where they have an opportunity to answer questions and they're getting deprived of that opportunity, but Mr. Roberts is correct. It's a relatively new practice. Are you okay proceeding without having those questions asked to your client?
I am, Your Honor, and
I bet he is.
Mr. Roberts has just said that there are some courts even in this building, who do not even allow questions at this juncture. So it is a relatively new process. It is a situation that's unavoidable. I think the court is justified in informing the jury that those questions won't be asked, and then proceeding forward.
Okay. In terms of preference, Mr. Johnson, of what to tell the jury versus not tell the jury, my thinking, we could go as vague as, unfortunately, she's not available this morning. We could say she's had a medical emergency and she cannot be here. I guess it's, I don't want anything we say to the jury to potentially prejudice her, but I'll leave it to you for your input, what you would prefer from the court.
Your Honor, I think what the court has expressed here in this courtroom is appropriate, and what we've expressed in the chambers. I have no problems leaving the court's. I'm not going to try to micromanage the things the court says. Simply expressing that she can't be here. It's a medical situation.
Okay.
That's all we've asked for, and I think that's appropriate.
Okay, is that acceptable to you, Mr. Roberts?
I'd have to defer to the defense on this question anyway, Judge.
He doesn't
All right, anything
care.
before we bring the jury out?
Just briefly, Judge, with that, obviously then Mr. Johnson will formally need to rest his defense. I do anticipate calling Lieutenant Hooksman to the stand. We've discussed in chambers again, just to revisit the 2 video issue very briefly. I did suggest this morning that perhaps an adopted admission instruction could be given to the jury based on Ms. Vander Ark's testimony about the contents of the first video. I think we've all agreed that the better course here, especially with her not being able to come up and participate in the proceedings today, that Lieutenant Hooksman will just simply testify to that. She said multiple times if that's what the video shows, we'll just take some brief testimony from Lieutenant Hooksman, and we will still continue with the previous ruling and the previous agreement that was made here that we will not play that video for the jury. I then do anticipate playing the second video that we've discussed, and that was kind of been planned all along. Introduce that through Lieutenant Hooksman, and that video plays about 18 minutes or so. Just to caution the folks in the gallery, there is no way to do this without projecting it on one of the monitors. I think the court's indicated that what it will do is raise the screen here, we'll project it on the TV so that only the jury can see these things, but the rest of the gallery certainly can see those things from the camera perspective. It won't be captured, but the members of the gallery can see that. It begins with an image because the camera is fixed directly at Timothy, deceased, in the closet. There's only a few seconds of it. I've narrowed it down as much as possible, but
We won't see that.
Context for the jury so they understand.
I don't believe we will see that.
And the video starts within a few seconds of the defendant walking into that closet, and then what transpires from there is what is really the most relevant portion of that. But again, it's difficult to look at, it's difficult to see, and anyone that thinks that they're going to have a hard time with it, I would just suggest to them when we get to that point to exit the courtroom. But at a certain point, we can't pull the punches too much about what took place here, because these are terrible
So just anybody watching, the judge has been really, really good. He's not shown any pictures out of respect for Timothy, who is the victim in this case. The medical examiner, her description was enough. She said you could literally count his ribs through just his skin. He had no muscle mass. You could see tissue. You could see the color, like tissue color or whatever, through the skin. So there was a picture that the prosecutor tried to get that was when Timothy was still alive. But the judge said no. So there have been no pictures. I think she's not here. She knows what's coming. I 100% believe that. Really, at this point, just tell the jury she's getting her bed, everything, getting her new home set up. That's why she's not here. She knows what you're going to do. She doesn't want to answer those jury questions, and she may be, I didn't realize that she didn't. She maybe thought that she was going to have to answer those today. And man, would I love to know what they were. Her son, Paul, who came in and testified against her, he had to answer them. He had to sit there while her attorney threw him under the bus and tried to blame him for everything. She let that happen. She got on the stand and she tried to blame Paul for everything. It was beyond disgusting. You've already tortured a kid, and this kid, he's 21 now. This happened in July of 22. This trial just happened. And you can see his thought process has changed now that he's in jail. He's charged with first-degree child abuse. She's charged with open murder, which I'm not exactly sure what that means. It's in Michigan. I don't know. But you can see the things that are starting to change in his mind. He does not call her mom. He calls her Shanda. And he's understanding what he did. He's remorseful. He feels horrible. The defense attorney said, "Did you love your brother?" And he said, "No, I do now. But what I did, I can't tell you that I did then, because," and he said, "and if I did, I didn't enough." It was heartbreaking. His testimony was heartbreaking. I hope that he gets a chance to get out at some point. I hope she never gets out, because I mean, she's a piece of work, and so she's not here because she doesn't want to be. I don't believe she's ill. I don't believe anything. I don't believe she's gonna hurt herself. I don't believe any of it. Not after watching her on the stand. Not after watching what she did to her son, allowed her attorney to do to her son. She's just not here because it's gonna hurt her.
Circumstances, and the jury, I think, needs to be afforded the opportunity to see what transpired in the basically 18 minutes that the defendant waited to call 911.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Johnson, any objections to that?
No, Your Honor, I don't. And while we have an agreement, Mr. Roberts and I, as to the first video, the before video, there'll be descriptions of it. I'm not sure if Mr. Roberts is going to want an instruction as to why that video wasn't provided for the jury as well. I think that I wouldn't object to that. I think that's appropriate as part of our agreement. But he may have jurors sitting there saying, "Well, I didn't get to see that one." So if he wants an instruction for that, I would not have an objection to that either.
Okay, so yeah, what we're going to do is, and I forgot to tell Mr. Weaver this, so what we're going to do is we're going to have the shut off, so that, specifically out of respect for Mr. Ferguson, although this TV is going to be angled toward the jury, and obviously it's in view of the gallery, I do not want it broadcast out of respect for him. So this TV will be going, but and as well as the witness. But again, I'm instructing those members of the media that are in the courtroom today, I do not want this video, including images of Mr. Ferguson and his deceased, to be broadcast. With that, anything else before we bring the jury out, Mr. Roberts?
No, Judge.
All right, Mr. Johnson?
No, sir.
All right, please rise.
And I'm not so sure that she didn't have her son, her youngest son, who's 9 or 10 now, in court because the judge made, somebody leave the other day when she was going to be on the stand because her testimony was going to be rough. And he was like, this is inappropriate. I was like, who told you to bring your youngest son?
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here on time. It's been a while. We've delayed you. As you'll notice, Ms. Vander Ark is not present this morning. Unfortunately, she's suffering some medical distress this morning. The reason we've been delaying is we've been trying to alleviate that medical distress, and so the court was willing to wait a little bit while we did some other matters to see if she was able to be present. She is not. She certainly will not be present during this morning, and she may not be present for the rest of the trial. I don't know, but at least she's not here today. And again, it's not by court order. It's because, unfortunately, she's unable to be here because of a medical issue. So with that, we will continue the trial in her absence. Mr. Johnson, and that also, unfortunately, means that we will not be able to ask her your questions. It was my preference to have that happen, and I tried to get that to happen, but unfortunately, we will be unable to do that. So, Mr. Johnson, any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor, at this juncture, the defense rests.
Okay, Mr. Roberts, any rebuttal witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, people recall the tenants.
I'm surprised he's calling any rebuttal. He doesn't need it. I mean, in my opinion, he can be a little arrogant, as prosecutors can be, but
This matter now pending, you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give
He's
will be
done-
the truth,
he's
the whole
done
truth,
okay.
and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And put your hand down, grab a seat. You can just go ahead, please, again, state your name for the record, spelling your first name and last name.
Lieutenant Joel Hoeksema, Joelhoeksema.
Lieutenant, I want to, let's just start off with, you brought People's Exhibit number 34 up to the podium there, or up to the witness stand with you there. That's the bottle of hot sauce, and you actually sees two of the same type of hot sauce from the residence, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's one of those bottles?
That's correct.
And you heard the testimony yesterday from Ms. Vander Ark where she indicated that there was some discussion about ordering the hot sauce from Amazon because you couldn't find hot sauce she couldn't find hot sauce that Timothy didn't like, or something to that effect in Myers. Do you recall that?
I do.
Could you go ahead and read for the jury the label there for that hot sauce?
Elijah's extreme regret is screaming super hot. It packs the fire of the two hottest peppers in the world, the Trinidad Scorpion and Carolina Reaper peppers. Your tongue will burn from the sting of the scorpion. Your eyes will tear up as sweat pours off your head. Your throat feels the burn of the Carolina Reaper going down. The pain becomes unbearable, and you feel like you just ate a burning hot coal. That's when you realize extreme regret, not for wimpy hot sauce lovers. Use with caution, or you'll regret it.
Okay. Now, did you also hear the testimony yesterday from Ms. Vander Ark in regards to two videos that were actually obtained as part of the investigation into this matter?
I did.
And let's talk about that first video first. It sounded funny when I said it. Talk about the first video, that it's a video that actually shows Timothy Ferguson being brought into the small room, but being brought into that closet just hours before he passes away. Are you familiar with that video?
I am.
And have you seen that video?
I have.
And we've made an agreement because of the sensitive nature of the video and its, frankly, graphic nature, that's not going to be played for the jury. Is that your understanding?
That's correct.
I do want to, unfortunately, have to ask you some questions about it. So if you could just recall that video. And first of all, explain to the jury what camera that video was obtained from.
So we spoke earlier that we had seized several video cameras from the home. This specific camera was called a LaView camera, and it was found originally during our the execution of the first search warrant right outside the door of the small room. Further into the investigation, it was discovered that there was a micro SD card within this camera that contained video files.
And that camera and the video that we're talking about, what does that what does it capture, at least in terms of the overview of where it's pointed?
So at the time those video files were generated by the camera, it was positioned within the small room in one of the corners, looking at Timothy when he was in there.
And you've had an opportunity again to review those, is that correct?
That's correct.
And at approximately 11 o'clock, 23:03 in military time, 11 o'clock or so, you observe Ms. Vander Ark on that video.
I do.
And what does she do?
On the video around that time that you mentioned, Ms. Vander Ark is observed placing a tarp into the closet and kind of spreading it out as a makeshift bed.
And after she does that, what happens after that?
After she lays the tarp on the floor, she is seen dragging Timothy by the arms onto the tarp and into the room.
And are you able to see Timothy's body at that point in time?
I am.
And what condition would you describe? How would you describe his physical condition at that point?
His eyes were open, but not really seeing anything. He appeared to be unresponsive. He didn't speak at all. He moaned a few times. It's very concerning watching that and seeing his appearance.
And you've also obviously had an opportunity to see both the photographs of Timothy at the scene as well after he was deceased and the autopsy photos. Did he appear substantially the same way that he appeared in those photographs as well?
He did. Very, very thin, bones protruding. In particular, he wasn't wearing any pants, so I could see his hip bones and his knee joint very prominently displayed as she positioned him in front of the camera.
And did it appear that he was wearing a diaper?
He was wearing an adult diaper.
And you said that Ms. Vander Ark positioned him in front of the camera so that what was facing the camera, I guess?
His face was facing the camera. It was the primary focus of the camera, is to keep a view of his face.
And that camera also records audio, does it not?
It does.
And did it record any audio from Ms. Vander Ark as she was pulling Timothy into the closet and positioning him on the floor?
It did. I could hear Ms. Vander Ark tell Timothy that he is pathetic, and then adds, but I already knew that as she was dragging him in. She also makes a comment to him that you owe me the biggest apology in the world, and suggests that he wouldn't be able to leave the restroom or leave the room for restroom breaks unless she receives an apology from him.
And then does she leave the room at that point?
She does.
Does she come back a little while later?
I believe it's approximately 15 minutes later she comes back into the room.
And during that time period, though, are you able to observe Timothy on that video?
I do.
And does Timothy do something between the time that she leaves the first time and the time she comes back?
Initially, she had positioned him on his side with his face facing the camera, and over the period of about 15 minutes, he rolled onto his back, so his face was no longer visible.
When she comes back in the second time, what does she do?
She repositions him so his face is visible to the camera. She has one of her Great Danes come into the room and instructs the Great Dane to lick his face, trying to get what appeared to me trying to get a reaction out of him, and even makes a comment to the dog saying that, see, he reacted to you.
And so does the Great Dane, does the Great Dane stay in the room at that point or not?
It kind of steps over him, licks his face, investigates, and then eventually leaves the room after she provided the dog instructions to lick his face.
And what does she do at that point?
During this time, and previously while I observed Timothy in the room, he was taking short, shallow breaths through his mouth. Kind of picture how a fish out of water would breathe, with gasping for breath through their mouth. And she clamps his mouth shut, tells him that he doesn't need to breathe like that, and then holds his mouth shut for a period of time until he's forced to take breaths through his nose, and tells him, see, you didn't need to breathe through your mouth like that. You're being a dummy or an idiot, something along those lines.
And does she leave the room at that point?
She does.
And is that the last time anyone actually has any contact with Timothy in that room?
That's correct.
And you've had an opportunity, does that camera continue to record all through the night into the next morning?
It does.
Because this was about between 11 and 11:30 on July 5th, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so the camera records into the next morning, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you've had an opportunity to watch all of that video, is that my understanding?
Yes.
And at some point, does it appear that, and that you're not a medical doctor, I understand that, but does it appear that Timothy actually passes away while in view of that camera?
Yes, it appears that way to me. He can be seen, his chest rising, lowering very slightly, small little movements, and then there is a point in time where you stop seeing that, and his body just kind of relaxes, and it appears to me that he has died at that point.
And from that point on, is there any movement of his body until the next morning? Is there any movement of his body at all to indicate that he's moving or alive?
There is not. There is no more movement from his body from that point.
And we're going to now play for the jury you're aware that there was a recording that takes place later that morning, is that correct?
That's correct.
Starting around approximately 6:20 or so of that same camera, is that correct?
Yes.
And just give they'll be able to watch it and hear it, but what are we looking at initially when we see the video?
Initially, you'll see Timothy as he was positioned, and then you'll see Ms. Vander Ark enter the room, and you'll see her reaction regarding finding him.
And
What I know to be deceased, but I don't believe she does at that time.
For the record, this will be People's 46.
We will not
It's on
see
flash
this.
drive. It's pulled up on my computer, ready to go.
I don't know if we'll hear it.
So the jury understands I think the court's intention is to only play it through the monitor by the jury box. I think everybody can see that.
Can anyone see Mr. Weaver, can you maybe angle the TV out just a little bit?
You're probably going to want the lights dim too.
Yeah. I'll do it. I got it. Let me see. Mr. Roberts, are you connected to the? All right, let's.
I think we'll just confirm that's not a view of the camera for.
I don't believe so, no.
It can be pushed closer too, so.
What do you need, wait,
Yes.
I said it can be pushed closer too, so.
if you're worried about it?
Oh, no, I've instructed him not to record it, so,
I think we're probably just going to see the officer here.
and then I'll worry about getting him on here, so. Lieutenant, is it on your screen?
There is nothing yet.
Okay, nothing yet, but you can see the
Yes, I can see
D.
the
D.
normal screen that's been appeared,
Okay.
that's been on it.
I think she knew this was coming.
It's not showing up. I've got G and C.
It's not over, I don't have it on mine.
Reconnect the NC Wi-Fi. See if that- should be connected. Go back number.
He tried to get this in through her testimony, but she was smart enough to she had heard everything that was going on, so she was smart enough to answer it enough that he wasn't going to be able to try to impeach her with the video. So I didn't think he was actually going to get him in at all.
I'm showing DA, if I do my phone, I can see it.
But I think I think she didn't want to answer the jury questions, and I think she maybe knew these were coming.
The card from or the laptop from the cart.
We have a laptop.
Oh, okay, all right, well, let's do that, because I can see it on my phone when I pull it up, so.
You can, oh wait, I'm not going to see popped up. Maybe we just give it just a second, so the court see just.
Lawyers and technology don't go hand in hand very well.
Can you see if you can connect the That's the TV. You ever tried that? Will that work? Some go TV later. Let's go for it. See what happens. Yeah. It's connected.
And also, I know it's really new, but I love that jurors can ask questions. I think it's really good. I think it keeps them engaged in what's happening.
All right, get Sean down here.
Oh, seriously. Good heavens. You know, you guys had like an hour this morning before you even started because you were waiting on see if she was showing up, and you could have done this. Let me see where we're at. Let me see.
Sir, Your Honor, could it be because that's turned off?
It lines up and it's just another screen. Bring him back to the jury room, so. All right, please rise.
I tell you. Oh, these guys. Judges, lawyers, they cannot do technology. Well, you don't know if you can hear my Great Danes, but I think the mailman's here. They're going nuts.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have our technology issues fixed, so you may proceed, Mr. Roberts.
All righty.
Again, for those in the audience that have not seen any of these images, this is not easy footage.
And Kim, old Shanda, she worked IT for years. She could have done it. That other voice is Paul.
Timothy.
Here, see if you can open his jaw.
Timothy.
Come on, give him a rescue breath. Come on, quick. What?
It's snow.
Okay.
And it's still very, very wet.
Well, I think I feel it moving.
Timothy. Hey. Hey.
Come on, buddy.
Timothy.
Come on, buddy. Sharma, stop. Okay, give another breath, please. I saw him moving during the night, sweetie.
Yeah. Timothy. Come on.
Come on. I'm gonna go get some water, see if we can get it done.
Come on, buddy. Come on. Come on. Come on. Hey.
You okay?
Come on, Timothy.
It's all good, we're gonna water. We can't close his eyes, that's usually a sign that he's not strong, but. Come on, buddy. Can you open his jaw for me? Come on. Come on. Please, buddy. Come on. Come on. Please, come on.
Timothy.
Come on, buddy. Come on, baby. Come on.
Come on, Timothy.
Here. Let's get out of here and sit him up or something. Come on. I may end up being late for this. We just gotta make sure he's okay. No, this is not. I'm glad we checked on him.
Yeah.
You gotta put his 500 to do that. Come on. You're okay. His head flat when you do that. Stomach away. Keep going.
He's throwing up.
Well, then, that's a good thing. Come on. Go give me a towel quick. Come on, buddy. This cannot be happening. Come on, buddy. Come on, Timothy. Come on, buddy. Hurry up, please. There's one in the bathroom. Come on. Come on, Timothy. Come on, buddy. Come on. Can't do it till we get him out quite quick. Come on. Okay, that's progress. Come on. Come on, buddy. Come on. No, that's wrong spot. There's nothing in this. No, there should be. Come on, come on, get flat, dude. Keep going. Come on. No, Sharma, get back. Come on, buddy.
Oh my, get back.
Come on, buddy.
Mama?
What? Did you get something? Keep going. Keep going. Here, let me trade off. It should be faster. here. Should we call an ambulance? Not yet. Come on, baby, come on, buddy. Come on. Oh, where's the towel? Come on, buddy. You should be able to put stuff out here. Come on, buddy. Come on, sweetie. His dog's with her. Yeah, it is. Come on, buddy. Yeah, a little. Get the dog into crate quickly. Come here, Shanda. Come on, buddy. Go. Connect to the beat. Or Shanda. Come on, Shanda. Nobody check on him. Yeah. Go. Come on, Shanda. Please, baby. Shanda. Now is not the time. No, it's not.
I don't know how the judge just sits there.
Yeah. Good. Nobody. Come on. Come on. Yeah, I know, there's nothing I can do. When I push in his chest rifle, or when I go in, you know. Yeah. Then he's not walking. That's nothing new. You sure it's not supposed to be him? No. Nobody. Back to it. Is the seat in that one? Nobody. No. No, no. Wait. Wait. It's all day if you want. Nobody. Can you take one? 2 minutes? Yeah. How do you look? You still up with your phone? I know this one. Come on, people. Come on, come on, buddy. Come on. Doing anything? His eyes just closed so that big. Really not. Yeah, but they just closed. Come on, keep going. Doing anything for me? This isn't all that dream. Come on, buddy. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. What? Come on, buddy. Come on. You have your belt. You already put it on. I just want to make it look like he's in that way. I have to go on the line. Yeah. That's probably been on a hunger strike. In the week. I don't know what to do, Paul. I don't know. It's 4788 Marshall Road. I woke up to go to work. Yeah, and my son's not breathing. I woke up to check on him before. He's 15. He's been on a hunger strike. He wouldn't eat lately. And I've been checking on him all night because he said he was feeling good last night. And I woke up to get ready to work this morning and he's not breathing. Yes. He's on fast. Can I put you on speaker? Yes, he's on the fly. Get him off his bed. He's on the walk bed. I might have taken laps a year or two ago, but I know how to do it, yeah. Okay, let me put you on speaker. you're on speaker. Yep. Okay. He ate yesterday, but he hasn't eaten. He's like, he's driving me crazy because he wouldn't eat hardly. And so he got really skinny and he won't eat. And I was just about to call the doctor this morning because he's just been horrible. He's a teenager. He's 15 and he did eat yesterday, but not a lot. I checked on him at, I don't know, 5:30? Yeah. Yeah. Go unlock it. I told you to go unlock it. Shanda. Yes. Yes. Yes, I am. Yes. Yes, I do. Pinch his nose, open his airway. He's got like brown stuff coming out of his mouth. Yep. I don't know, it's brown liquid. Scoop it out. It's like dribbling out. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, my 20-year-old standing right here. 21, 22, 24, 25, 26. Okay. 30, 31, 32, 34, yeah, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44. Take the card. Yeah, he is. Yeah. He's on the spectrum, high functioning, and he has ADHD. Yes. It's not the first time he's done this with not eating, so. Okay. He's still going. It's possible. But my husband and stepdad had a stroke in January, and then his dad and stepmom called us last week to tell us they were divorced. And so it's been rough, and he's been, like I said, he's done a hunger strike before. I would have been more worried. Hold on, so I got it. So, I don't think there's anything in his reach, honestly. Benadryl's the only thing, or off-brand Excedrin, extra strength.
questions there. You heard references in there a couple of times, Ms. Vander Ark, in that 911 call mentioning going to check on Timothy at about 5:30. Again, you've had an opportunity to review all of that video, is that correct?
That's correct,
At
sir.
any point in time around 5:30 or any time after the video that you've described where she drags him into the closet, does she come and check on Timothy?
She does not.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson.
No questions for this.
I wouldn't think
Do
so.
we have any jury questions? As far as you can tell. Mr. Weaver, you want to check? No? Okay. You don't?
So the reason I kept shaking my head no, she was talking, one, she was on tape, camera, video, whatever, that we didn't see, we could hear. She's on video saying, we have to say he's on a hunger strike. He's been on a hunger strike. That's her defense. That's her whole defense. That's what her lawyer said. It's gone. He doesn't even need to do a closing argument. Just stand up and be like, we lose. Because that's what she said. It's what she even said on the stand. That's what he's hanging his hat on. And then she said, we have to say he's on hunger strike. That video, I'm glad we couldn't see it. Hearing it was hard enough. That has been the hardest thing I have heard this entire trial. That was horrible. And she was caught in so many lies from her own testimony in that video. That should be enough for the jury right there. They should have not been on the fence to begin with, but if they were, they should not be anymore.
All right. You can stand down, Lieutenant. Thank you. Any additional? All right. All right. So at this time, well, we're close to the noon hour. We've had kind of a break in the morning. I guess I'll leave it to the jury. I don't want your answer now. You can go back and certainly talk about it. We do have some final jury instructions we have to do. We'll have to do.
We have to close as well, Judge.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I guess I suppose you guys want to take the lunch hour to prepare closing.
The judge is like, do you?
I don't know.
Do you really?
Mr. Johnson, you prefer to have a break for lunch before we go into closings?
Yes.
Thank you. An affirmative answer. Thank you. All right, so at this time, we will take a lunch break. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Please don't look any social media.
I think that judge was, I mean, I know he's got to sit there and he has to sit there and not be, who are you? And not be emotional about what he just saw, but you could tell. You can tell it shook him up. And I don't know how it couldn't. We didn't see it, and it was horrible. And that's why he was probably like, you don't really have to do closings. You're good. We'll see what this fella, see what he's all about. This little reporter. Where are you
Big
at?
surprise, the fact that she is not in the courtroom. Yeah, definitely a big surprise, the fact that she is not in the courtroom. The judge told jurors that she was, quote, under some medical distress and, as you had said, essentially waived her right to be present within the court. So that means her defense attorneys are completely taking over, and that means those questions that jurors might have had are going unanswered. Now, with Vander Ark not physically present, this ended up with the defense resting their case. There was then a rebuttal with the prosecution. They ended up calling a lieutenant with Norton Shores Police, and he presented that hot sauce that we've continually talked about.
All right, we know all this. We just saw it all. Why are you recapping? All right, well, doesn't look like closings are going to be super long. The prosecutor should just get up and say, well, you saw it in the video. And the defense should get up and say, I'm sorry, we wasted your time. I hope that they show her sentencing, because I will definitely watch it, because I want to see her, and I want to hear what this judge has to say to her after just what he just saw. So once we do closings, we'll go right over to the next verdict. It didn't take long. Did not take long.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll commence with closing arguments. Mr. Roberts.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan, I want to thank you for your time and attention to these matters. As we've repeatedly indicated, and as now you've seen through the evidence and the testimony in this case, these are incredibly difficult, incredibly sensitive matters, and we certainly do thank you for your time and attention to them. I usually like to start closing statements in a homicide trial such as this by showing you a photograph. And that photograph is usually the victim in the case prior to their death. In this case, our victim was a child. Would hope to be able to show you a photograph of what he looked like within a few months of his death. I can't do that. I can't do that because the defendant apparently took it upon herself to make sure there were no photographs taken of the victim in the 6 months leading up to his death. An opening statement, I told you about that song, What's the Matter Here? And the line from that song, answer me and take your time. What could be the awful crime he could do at so young an age? So ask yourselves that. What was the awful crime that Timothy committed to have these atrocities perpetrated upon him? What did he do? He stole some food? He took some things apart? That's all I heard. And he paid for that with his life. And like I told you, I can't answer the why. I can't answer why the cold and lowly things were done to him, because it doesn't make sense. It does not make any sense that a 15-year-old should be made to suffer the way Timothy was, to be made a prisoner the way Timothy was. And make no mistake, he was a prisoner in that home. We give prisoners rights. Prisoners of war have rights. Timothy had none of those because the person charged with his care and custody refused them. Kept him locked up in the basement of that home with motion sensors and alarms to make sure he didn't even go upstairs, let alone anywhere else, but not to even go upstairs. Alarms on his body to go off. He didn't like the noise. Motion sensors on the stairs if he tried to go upstairs. Alarms on his small room, closet, door if he tried to get out. Motion sensors if he put his arm down during a punishment. Cameras watching every moment. And at the heart of all of this, the defendant. That alone, ladies and gentlemen, is a basis for first-degree child abuse. The serious mental infliction of harm upon Timothy as a result of her actions is all you need to find that the defendant is guilty of first-degree child abuse. And that's the tip of the iceberg. Towards the end of Ms. Vander Ark's testimony yesterday, I kept pressing her on that question. What did he do? What is it that he was doing? Apparently so desperate for food that he ate frozen chicken nuggets and uncooked hamburger. Explain this to the jury so they can understand, so they can make sense of why it was that you chose to do these things to him. And she got mad at the end. towards the end of her testimony. It became clear that she was still mad at Timothy. He was sneaky and deceitful. Over and over again, he was sneaky and deceitful. He'd sneak things when he wasn't supposed to. He was deceitful. He would lie about things. And you heard over and over again in the text messages. He's lying about that. He's not going to get away with it. This is all fake. All of those things. So ask yourself this question. Who do we know was sneaky and deceitful here? The defendant. And it started when, after 18 minutes of her son being unresponsive and so obviously deceased, she finally decides to call 911. But she better get her story straight before we call 911. So what's the last thing she says before she calls 911 to Paul? We'll have to tell him he's been on a hunger strike. Before that, where's your belt? Put your belt on him. I want to make it look like he's been this way. No emotion in her voice, no tears. Start with, why does it take you 18 minutes to call 911? You saw the image? You saw Timothy laying there on the floor? You heard them repeatedly talking about how he was stiff, how he wasn't moving, how he wasn't breathing, how his eyes were fixed open, and they don't call 911. Who does that? How does a parent do that? Paul asks her, should we call 911? Should we call for an ambulance? Not yet. And it's almost another 10 minutes before she calls after that. Then when she calls 911, the lies start. I came and checked on him at 5:30. And then when I came down, he was unresponsive on his bed. Both completely false. We know he wasn't checked on at 5:30. We know the last thing that she did and said to her son. You could hear it in Lieutenant Hooksman's testimony today. The last thing she did to her son was to drag him into a small room, throw him down on the ground like he was a piece of meat on a tarp, in the room where she says he wanted to be. That was his comfort. Positions him in front of the camera so she can see. Calls him stupid. Then when he has the indignity to roll over, no, that's not good enough. She comes back. Positions him again in front of the camera. Makes the dog lick his face to get a reaction from him. Holds his mouth closed and said, see, dummy, you don't need to open your mouth to breathe. Imagine those being the last words you said to your child. Because that's what it was. That's the last thing anybody said to Timothy. You don't need to open your mouth to breathe, dummy. Shut away in isolation after months and months of physical and mental abuse at the hands of the defendant, and Timothy slipped away. No, I went to check on him at 5:30. Lie. I have to put you on hold because I have to pull him off the bed. Lie. He's been on a hunger strike for the last couple of weeks, but I was just about to call a doctor. Lie. Then the lies continue. Officer Peasky, Detective Peasky, interviewing the defendant. Why is there a lock on the fridge and the freezer? He's got access. The locks are on the fridge and the freezer because he would leave the door open, but he has access to the pantry. Lie. Text messages over and over again talking about how he was able to get into the pantry and her repeated commands to Paul, starting in February, to make sure that all the food is locked up and Timothy doesn't have access, including the pantry. Yesterday on the stand, that shifts into, well, he did have access to a small cabinet, where there were some canned goods. So this boy who was dying of emaciation, we're supposed to believe that he's going to have the ability to go into a cabinet to get canned goods, get a can opener, open them, and cook himself some food. Well, we know that's not true. He's not allowed to have food. He can't do that. The only thing you can hear in these text messages that he's allowed to have for those last few weeks after the June 13th photograph, which we'll get to in a minute, is the bread with hot sauce. Did you hear any testimony from her about full meals that she would cook for him? Anything? No. What's her response when she gets sent the picture? Mama, we need to actually feed him. That's the phrase. We need to actually feed him? He's bone thin, Mama. I think honestly, we need to actually feed him. And what's her response? Give him bread. Give him bread with peanut butter. The unresponsiveness is probably fake, but I see what you mean. Yesterday, she wants you to believe, I didn't see that photograph. She literally uses the word see in her text message. I see what you mean. And then tries to split hairs about what that phrase means. Let's assume she didn't see the photograph for just a moment. Your child is so alarmed that he's saying he's bone thin, I think we actually need to feed him, and your first response is give him bread? What does that tell you about her mindset? Her mindset is, that's what he gets to eat. He gets bread. Maybe some peanut butter. That's what he gets to eat. Not the canned goods that he can get access to under the cabinet, and heaven forbid he commit the crime of sneaking a piece of candy or eating some frozen chicken nuggets. Give him bread. Detective Peasky. Well, after the stroke, he went on a hunger strike. That was a lie. Paul told you it was a lie. He never went on a hunger strike. There isn't a single reference here to him being on a hunger strike in January or in July. The bigger binder. More of the text messages, just about Timothy. All of the text messages, just about Timothy. I gave her the option yesterday. I said, show me the text about the hunger strike. You're so concerned about everything. You're so concerned about watching the cameras, setting the alarms, making sure the food is what it's supposed to be, making sure he's running stairs, doing wall sits, getting cold baths, all of that stuff. Show me in here where you're talking about him being on a hunger strike. Nothing. The hunger strike thing isn't real. And think about it for just a moment. If your child was on a hunger strike, what would you do? I know what I'd do. Remember, we talked about reason and common sense. What's the reasonable thing to do? Get your child to a doctor. Get your child to a therapist. Get your child to something. But what does she actually do? The first set of text messages we hear? The first text message, February 18th. So this would be on or about the time of that first hunger strike. First, rude, and second, wire his hands free. That's where we're starting. Wire his hands free because he's a human being. And what did he get into that he felt he needed to brush his teeth to hide it? I think most parents would be ecstatic about their child actually brushing their teeth. I know I am, and my kids do it. But to her, him brushing his teeth is a sign that he's hiding something. Sorry, didn't know he was up. What do you mean you didn't know he was up? Has he not been upstairs against the wall? So he's supposed to be against the wall. No. What? Why the heck not? What the heck has been going on? Check the brownies in the kitchen. Check everything not locked away. Check where the flipping keys have been. This is in February. We're not even talking about the last couple of weeks that Timothy's alive. This is in February. And she's already started talking about locking away food. 5 months before Timothy dies, and she's talking about restricting his access to food. Hunger strike? No. She realized late last night that he was thin. threatened to take him to the ER if he didn't eat. We know what she did to him the last night. She wasn't remotely concerned about his physical appearance. And make no mistake, she could see his physical appearance because she dragged him into the closet, and Lieutenant Hooksma described to you in unfortunately vivid detail. And the images are horrifying, truly horrifying. But you've seen the photos of what he looked like when he died. And that was hours before. A mother dragging her child into a room, throwing him down on the ground. Does that sound like I realized last night he was ill, and I threatened to take him to the ER if he didn't eat? So I made him a piece of toast with butter on it? She even admitted that was a lie. Said he was done after he ate the toast, went downstairs. He couldn't even move at that point. You heard Dr. DeYoung's testimony about what happens to the body as it breaks down, as it goes through these stages of malnutrition. He was 69 pounds. The average, and he was average height, the average 15-year-old male is 132 pounds. He was 62 pounds underweight. And we saw what he was like 3 weeks before. Make no mistake, she saw what he was like 3 weeks before. She got ready for work in the morning and went to check on him. No, that's not true. But it's interesting that she mentions getting ready for work. Because on that video, you can hear her. And she's been working on Timothy for a number of minutes at this point in time. And she says, well, I guess I'm going to be late for work, but we've got to get him responsive. Talk about cold. I guess I'm going to be late for work. Your child is dead. And all you can think about is being late for work? She had to have Paul help him get off the bed. Lie. On a hunger strike 2 weeks ago. Lie. There's no pictures of Timothy since January. That one's true. And then when the detective starts to ask about the unusual things in the house, what leg shackles? What are these leg shackles for? Oh, those are Paul's leg shackles. Now bear in mind, this is hours after this has taken place. And it's just lie after lie after lie. How do we know it's a lie? May 18th, the Wisely transaction is handcuffs and leg cuffs for Timothy from Amazon. Figured it would be okay to get those right away so we can talk about the sensors and stuff. That's her text message. The handcuffs and leg cuffs for Timothy. Well, I would never use them on Timothy. June 27th. He's moved around, so he got the cuffs in front of him instead of behind him. So he's handcuffed behind his back. I put the cuffs back behind him. Her. I put the cuffs back behind him. I will have to deal with less than 2 hours of sleep today, but not letting him get away with this BS. June 27th. That's 2 weeks after the photograph goes to her, showing how thin he is, and he's handcuffed behind his back by her. Could this be any more about her? Could this text message show you any more how this was all about her? I will have to deal with less than 2 hours of sleep today, but not letting him get away with this BS. It's all about her. Fell out of bed at 5:30. Nope, never happened. Never went to check on him. The last thing you said to your child was, you don't have to breathe with your mouth open, dummy. Oh, there's alarms on that room down there because we had the sewing stuff in there. Lie. The cameras were in the home because Gabriel would strip down naked and wander around. Maybe a camera was in there for that. But she doesn't care about wandering around naked. You heard the text messages. Timothy had to clean the garage with nothing on below his waist and then stand against the wall with nothing on below his waist. He had to earn his right to get clothes back. She doesn't care for kids that are running around the house naked. It's a form of punishment for her. Doesn't restrict his movement with shackles. Otherwise. Now, Ms. Vander Ark was up here yesterday for quite some time. And she told you about what an intelligent lady she is, and I will give her that credit. She is a highly, highly intelligent lady. It takes a lot to finish second in your class in law school, graduate magna cum laude. It takes a lot to get a score of 182 and pass the bar exam. Heck, it takes a lot to just pass the bar exam, let alone get a score of 182. So this is a highly intelligent woman we're dealing with. She clerked for not one, but two different judges, was clerking for a judge at the time her child died. Yet she wants you to believe that she doesn't remember any of this. Can't remember any of these things. I don't remember that text message. I don't remember doing that. I don't remember saying that. Every time she's confronted with something that she did or something that she directed to be done to Timothy, she can't remember. How does this woman hold down a job as a legal clerk? If your memory problems are that bad that you can't send these text messages, how are you not seeing a therapist? How are you not on medication to address these issues? You couldn't hold down a job if you were that, let alone a job as a legal clerk, if you had that many memory problems. Let's talk about the things that she can remember. Oh, right after Mother's Day, he weighed 104 pounds. And I asked a couple times, 108 pounds? No, 104 pounds. Absolutely certain about that. Somehow she can remember 2 months before Timothy dies, what he weighed. That's a detail that she can remember. The bad things? No, can't remember any of that. That's the detail that she can remember. How self-serving is that? That you can only remember the good things and you can't remember the bad things. And 3 weeks later, that's how he looks. Does that look like 104 pounds? Sure doesn't look like it to me. There isn't a single text message in here or in there, the larger binder, where she says, what are we doing? I don't understand why we're doing these things. Why are these things happening? Why is Timothy on a camera? Why is Timothy in handcuffs? Why is Timothy locked away in a small room? If she has all these memory issues, where are those text messages? Where are the memory issues in here? She knows everything that she wants to have done, and she's telling Paul day after day after day what to do to Timothy. Not struggling to remember what it is, not struggling to remember what it is that Timothy had done to be punished in this way. Not struggling with any of that. She doesn't have memory problems. She might have chosen at this point to block those things out from her memory. But make no mistake, all of these things happened. She did all of these things. It's only now that suddenly she has memory issues. So stressed out, so much stuff going on. Not so much stuff going on that you can't spend half of your time at work, especially in those last couple of days, just watching the camera. Watching while Timothy's in the bathtub for hours on end the day before he dies. Telling Paul to pour more cold water on him. Telling Paul to take a pizza roll. Take a pizza roll, warm it up, hold it in front of his face and see if he reacts, but be ready to snatch it away if he tries to eat it. This is supposedly when he's on a hunger strike. And you're going to bait him with food? She did all of these horrible, horrible things. And she doesn't get to hide behind saying, I just don't remember doing them. Or, I didn't intend for Timothy to come to any harm. Of course she intended for Timothy to come to harm. Of course she did, ladies and gentlemen. No rational person, no person who can score 182 on the bar exam, let alone any other individual, no parent, nobody with the logic and reasoning skills that she has could not understand the consequences of what she was doing. I didn't intend for any of this to happen. We don't even know if that's true. It's not. But we couldn't even say that that was true anyway. She can barely even say that because by her account, she doesn't remember doing any of these things. For all we know, she did intend for all of these things to happen, which of course she did. And remember we talked about the cookbook in voir dire. Went over it a couple of times. Unless you hear a defense from the judge in these instructions that says, if you find that the defendant just doesn't remember these things, that she can be found not guilty, she doesn't get the benefit of that. Don't add to the cookbook. Don't give her a defense that I just don't remember doing these things. I hope on some level, maybe she doesn't remember these things because they are so cold. They are so lowly. They are so dangerous that they took Timothy's life. Sleep deprivation. No clothes. Hot sauce. You heard the description of the hot sauce today. Oh no, that was Paul's idea. The hot sauce was Paul's idea. Paul's text to her. July 2nd, 3 days before Timothy dies. So apparently this hot sauce isn't just Carolina Reaper, it's also Trinidad Scorpion Chili Pepper. Her response? Yep. She knew what it was. She went out of her way, whether it was her or whether it was Paul at her direction, or the two of them doing it together, out of her way to find a hot sauce that would be too much for him to take. Let's set aside the logic for just a moment that how is it that you decide you're going to punish a child with hot sauce if the child likes hot sauce? It's ridiculous. That's the form of punishment? Of course not. That doesn't make any sense. Again, common sense. Don't check it at the door. He didn't like hot sauce. You know he didn't like hot sauce because they wouldn't be using it for a punishment if he liked it. This is July 2nd. This is weeks after this photograph is taken and sent to her when she can see how thin he is. Hot sauce. Hot sauce on bread. 4 slices with hot sauce. 4 slices, as long as there's plenty of hot sauce on it. Then if he waits 30 minutes, he can have some without hot sauce. So his reward for eating 4 slices of bread with hot sauce on it is if he can wait 30 minutes, he can have 4 regular pieces of bread. 30 seconds after she sends that text, she talks about getting chicken nuggets and fries for G. She can process all of this in her head. Whoop, punishment, hot sauce, Timothy, whoop, fries, chicken nuggets for G. That doesn't sound like somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. That doesn't sound like somebody who has memory issues. That doesn't sound like somebody who's not in control of their actions. She's in control of everything. She is watching everything. She knows everything. Even when Paul is supposed to be watching. She's watching as well and critiquing how well Paul is doing watching. He's with Timothy at the tub, and she's watching to make sure that Timothy doesn't look too comfortable in the tub. Move his head. Looks like he's trying to get comfortable. Pour some cold water on him. Do the pizza roll thing. Somehow as an act of grace, mercy, whatever you want to call it, go ahead and give him 2 pizza rolls, and I don't care if they're frozen. It's difficult to understand how a person can be so detached to another person, let alone a child. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the people's position in this case that the defendant is guilty of 2 crimes. That first crime is first-degree child abuse. In order to prove the crime of first-degree child abuse, I do have to prove the following. First, that Shanda Vander Ark is the parent of Timothy Ferguson. That goes obviously without question. Second, that the defendant either knowingly or intentionally caused serious harm and or serious mental harm to Timothy Ferguson. By serious physical harm, I mean any physical injury to a child that seriously impairs the child's health or physical well-being, including but not limited to brain damage, skull, bone fracture, subdural hematoma, subdural hemorrhage, dislocation, sprain, ankle, internal injury, poisoning, burn, scald, or severe cut. She killed him. She starved him to death. She directed that he be in an ice bath for hours at a time. And what was her story yesterday about the ice bath? Well, they didn't start off as ice baths. Okay, so they started off with cold water. No, they started off with hot water. Well, why would you put ice cubes in a hot bath? And how is that a punishment? Then confronted with the text, again, don't remember. Let him know that if he tries to sleep at all, sleep deprivation, he'll get another ice bath, there's been one before, sometime before you leave for work, and another when I get home. That's the description about 3 ice baths in one text message. I said, you wouldn't make up additional ice and put it in the freezer, would you, because you needed it for later? No, we wouldn't do that. Might want to toss the ice that is made into some Ziploc bags in the freezer tomorrow, or if we need a bunch more. You heard Dr. DeYoung's testimony. Timothy had signs of hypothermia. How does a 15-year-old in Michigan in July get hypothermia? By sitting in an ice bath for hours upon hours upon hours at a time. And that's what Timothy went through on the last day of his life. Tortured with a pizza roll that he could eat. Cold water repeatedly dumped on him. Repositioned if he started to feel comfortable. And she's watching everything. She's directing everything. Serious mental harm. I mean, any injury to a child's mental condition that results in visible signs of an impairment of the child's judgment, behavior, ability to recognize reality, or ability to cope with the ordinary demands of life. That's a no-brainer. The level of mental harm inflicted on Timothy is difficult to grasp. How a 15-year-old already with special needs, sensory, the sensory issue that she described, she's punishing him with hot sauce. She's punishing him with ice baths. She's punishing him with alarms that make noise that affects his ears. She's depriving him of sleep. She's depriving him of movement. She's depriving him of clothes. She's locking him in a closet. If that's not serious mental harm, then I don't know what is. And again, these are all at her direction. And don't let her off the hook, ladies and gentlemen, just because she stood up here and said yesterday, I didn't intend for these things to happen. Of course you intended for these things to happen. Of course you intended for these things to happen. She's guilty of first-degree child abuse. It's also the people's position that she's guilty of first-degree felony murder. If you find that she's guilty of that first-degree child abuse, you turn to the analysis of the murder charge here. And in order to prove first-degree murder, 2 sheets at once. First, that the defendant caused the death of Timothy Ferguson. That is, Timothy Ferguson died as a result of starvation and or physical abuse, physical neglect and abuse. You heard Dr. DeYoung's testimony about the cause of death for Timothy here, and all you needed to do was look at the photograph to see how he died. And again, I wish I could have spared everybody from seeing those photographs, but I can't, because I have to prove, and this is why, I have to prove how he died. The defendant has one of these 3 states of mind. She intended to kill, she intended to do great bodily harm to Timothy Ferguson, or she knowingly created a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or such harm would be the likely result of her actions. Let's talk about that first one for a moment. She intended to kill. I wish I could stand up here and tell you that I think she actually didn't have the intent to kill. I wish I could do that because the notion that you could starve a child to death intentionally over months and months, which is what it would take, I wish she didn't have that intent. I wish I didn't believe that she had that intent. And it's for you to decide whether or not she had that intent. But her actions sure show that she had that intent. If she wanted to kill Timothy, I wish she'd done it a lot faster than what she did. Because what he would have had to have gone through in those last few days or few weeks is unthinkable. But she had that intent to kill him. At a minimum, she had an intent to do him great bodily harm. And you can find either one. And even if you had struggled with finding that, she knowingly created a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or such harm would be the likely result of his actions. She made a situation so dangerous, so obviously dangerous to anyone, especially someone of her intelligence level, that death or great bodily harm was the likely result. Well, death was the result. Death was the result because of what she did to him, because of the things that she directed to be done to him. On the stand yesterday, she tried to say, well, some of this was Paul's idea. Paul did this, and Paul did that, and Paul did this, and Paul did that. If you need to, feel free to review these text messages. If you want, you can review the bigger binder of text messages, because these are all about Timothy as well. And when I say they're about Timothy, they're not about Timothy, all the good things that he's done, and all the good things we're going to do. It's all about the punishments. This is a small window. This is a larger window into the life, to the hell that Timothy's life was for the last 6 months. Every step of the way, her directing, her telling, her ordering, her threatening Paul to do the things. This was not on Paul. I told you in opening that you may not like Paul Ferguson. And I do believe that he is also in part responsible for Timothy's death here. But you had an opportunity to see Paul testify here. Did that look like the mastermind behind this? Or did that look like, as he put it, somebody who was just desperate for attention, desperate for the love of his mother, and doing the things that she wanted him to do? That's for you to decide. But I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that's what it was. That Paul was doing what she told him to do, because he knew what was going to happen to him if he didn't do those things. Quite simply, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said, this is a case of first-degree felony murder. The underlying felony being first-degree child abuse. That's the other element that you need to find happened here, that she committed that felony first-degree child abuse. And if you find those two things, if you find that she committed the first-degree child abuse, and that she had one of those three states of mind, and it doesn't matter which one you decide, but if she had any one of those three states of mind as it related to Timothy, then she's guilty of first-degree felony murder, and she's guilty of first-degree child abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, Timothy Ferguson, to the defendant, had ceased to be a person. Timothy Ferguson had become less than the animals that she trains. You heard her say it would never occur to her to do the things that she did to Timothy to the animals that she trains, to the dogs that she trains. He was less than a dog to her. And this was a fight that he was not going to win. But don't take my word for it. Of course, I had it tabbed. July 29th. And even if he sits up right before you get there, as you get there, I honestly don't care if you get a little rough with him. July 29th again. Trust me, I know he's thin. That being said, he told me a week and a half ago that he wanted to be thin to make me feel bad for punishing him. This is supposedly when he's on his hunger strike. You don't get to grump at him for that, though. I already lit into him for it.
I think he means June.
Cleaning up the rooms, directing Paul to make sure that he cleans up the rooms. And please check the carpet to see if it needs to clean that too. There's some different awesome cleaner for the carpet that he can use if he needs to. He will need to use a different green and yellow sponge for that. I do not want him using my nice sponges for either of those. July 1st, after the photograph that she's got. Might be best if you give him like 4 pieces of bread to eat before he starts work, just to make sure he stands up while he eats them, please. That way he has no excuses. July 1st, the camera in his room needs to be picked up, please. Ugh, lots of hot sauce for that. What do I do if he doesn't finish within the assigned time? Hot sauce. These are all after that photograph. So apparently this hot sauce isn't just Carolina Reaper, it's the Trinidad Scorpion chili pepper. Yep. While he's on a hunger strike, on July 5th, the day before he dies. Forgot to tell you this before I left. Timothy was doing his fake stumbling and falling last night, of course, so I decided to prove once again how fake it is. I asked him if he would stop doing that if he would eat a whole pizza by himself, and he said yes, of course. And then I told him how obvious it was that he was being fake, and he had just proven that yet again, and of course he just looked down and didn't respond. Can't say it any more blunt than she does. She was not going to let Timothy win. Plain and simple. And if that many died, then many died. He dies, she kicks into survival mode and starts to lie to the police. That alone evidences a guilty state of mind, ladies and gentlemen, but you don't need that. You don't need much more than these text messages to prove that Shanda Vander Ark is responsible because she intended to kill, because she intended to do great bodily harm, or she at least created a situation so dangerous that death or great bodily harm was a result to her child, Timothy Ferguson. And I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty of first-degree felony murder, first-degree child abuse. Thank you.
Mr. Roberts?
I don't know
Mr.
how
Johnson?
defense follows that up. Can't stand on the hunger strike anymore.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Everybody ready? You need a moment? You all good? Okay. I'm a child of the late 50s and grew up in the 60s and 70s, and during that period of time, and even the 80s and 90s, when you remembered something, it was in your head. It was something that was up here, and a memory was up there, and that's where the memories were. That's where we kept them, and it was a great system because they were all there, and if called upon to respond to a memory, a situation, an issue, the entire memory and its context will come tumbling out. Then we started doing something in the aughts and the 10s and the 20s, where we started having these devices called cellular phones. And in those cellular phones, they have this thing on them called text messaging, where you can write down whatever's going through your head at the moment and send it. It's a great system. I mean, let's face it, we all use it because it works, and it works well, and it's very utilitarian, and we love it. But I think if we had a chance to think about it, we'd all admit that what you text isn't everything that's going on. That what you text doesn't tell the whole story. The text you sent today don't tell the whole story of your whole day. They just tell a portion of it. They tell a snippet. They tell a story. But they probably don't tell what happened to you from the time you got up and you couldn't find your left shoe to the time you're going to go to sleep tonight and wishing you had an extra slice of that pie for dessert. It doesn't tell you all that stuff, right? It tells you a snippet. It tells you a bit. It doesn't tell if you're mad or you're kidding, or you're suggesting, or you're tired, or you didn't spell check before you sent it. So it says go when you want to say goat. It doesn't tell any of that stuff. It tells you a snippet. It tells you a portion. It tells you a particle. And that's what text messages do. The greatness of text messages are they're great. It's in the message. The weakness of them is they don't tell the whole story. And if someone were to grab someone's phone and look at what they did from a year and a half ago and try to figure out what they were thinking based on their text, they know that snippet, but they wouldn't know I'm venting. They wouldn't know that I don't take this serious. I don't mean this seriously. They wouldn't know that even though I'm mad at you, I still love you, because the part in the text is going to be you didn't clean your room, and that's it, because that other part isn't with it. The other part, our communication, even when I speak to you right now, our communication is the words that come out of my mouth are only about 35% of what information you're taking in. You're watching my body language, you're listening to the sound of my voice, you're listening to the context, you're looking at the situation. That fills in the other information that you're going to need to have in order to figure out, with the most powerful computers that known to man, our brains, what I really mean and what I'm really saying. If you have all you have is a text, ladies and gentlemen, it's like watching a movie with no picture. All you hear is the voices in the background. Somebody has to explain to you what else is going on in that scene. That's what we have here. We have a series of texts. We have a series of texts that people can select and jump around in terms of not just times and dates and times of day, and without reflection on the circumstances. You're at work, you have time to send a 3-second text before the judge calls you and says, come do something else. Or you're sitting in your living room, you're reading a book, and you can take your time with these texts. It doesn't tell you any of that. So what comes out to you is a distorted picture. My suggestion, someone takes your text, what comes out to you is a distorted picture. It's not the whole story. It's not the whole situation. It doesn't tell the whole thing. All the texts that you've written do not tell you the whole story of your life. It tells you what they refer to that moment, and that's it. And the rest has to be inferred. If someone comes along and takes it out of context, and takes it out of circumstances, and it takes it out of where it existed at the time you sent it, you have a different story than what was intended. The communication you're getting is different than what you intended. That's problem number one. Problem number two is when you take those texts and you back them up with somebody who's highly motivated to lie. Ladies and gentlemen, they didn't have supercomputers back when they invented the theory of relativity. But Einstein, he didn't have a supercomputer. They hadn't been invented yet. What Einstein used to do famously, he used to call them thought experiments, where he'd imagine a situation and then he tried to think his way through. He was pretty good at it. He kind of changed life on the planet doing this. He kind of changed life on the planet. Now, you've been told that Paul's deal was that he had immunity from prosecution for whatever he talked about, and he'd get a sentencing recommendation or something like that. And there was one other thing, I forget, it doesn't matter. There's 3 things you were told he said. He's charged with child endangerment, child abuse in the 1st degree. Okay. And you were told that by our judge that you can believe all of what somebody says, part of what somebody says, or none of what somebody says. You were told that was Paul's deal. I'm going to invite you to it, and that Paul could be charged with 1st degree murder, which Paul told you from the stand. I asked him, do you know what the penalty for that is? I sure do. He could be charged with 1st degree. Now, I want you to do this thought experiment. You're a lawyer. You're Paul's lawyer in this thought experiment of my making. And the prosecutor calls you and say, I want to use your client to testify against his mom. And you say, okay. And then you have the client testify. And then he testifies, he does everything he's required to do, everything he wants, they want it, he gives them, everything he could, he gives them. And then at the end, once he's done testifying, his lawyer finds out they've charged his client with first-degree murder anyway. After all, that wasn't part of the deal, right? He could be charged with first-degree murder. Paul could be, theoretically, it's not part of the deal, could be charged with first-degree murder, even though he's fully performed. What would, in this thought experiment, what would your reaction be that you sent your client in, he did everything he was told, and he still gets charged with first-degree murder? Might I suggest to you that you might be a little upset with that? Might I suggest to you that if you were informed that after Paul has performed and you're his lawyer and he's still getting charged with first-degree murder, that you're going to be upset? And I further suggest that you're going to tell everybody, you're going to tell all of your defense friends, all your defense lawyers, you're going to tell them, this is what they did to me. When do you think the prosecutor is going to get another defense attorney to serve your client up again? If you did that. When do you think they're going to get another defense attorney in this county and your thought experiment to serve up their client if he does what he's supposed to do and he still gets charged in the circumstances like we've described? Well, you know what the answer is. You know what the answer is. In your thought experiment, you can figure out this is what is not going to happen. Because you know what's going to happen when the defense community is going to find out what happened with Paul and his testimony. Get what he's supposed to, still got charged with first-degree murder. Get what he's supposed to. He's not going to be able to get, the prosecution's not going to get another defense attorney to come forward and give up their client again. All right. This is part of something that's obvious, and it doesn't have to be in writing. Everybody, if you do the thought experiment, it's in writing. It's not in writing, but you can do the thought experiment. You can bet your house Paul's not going to get charged with first-degree murder. You can bet your house that Paul's deal is not his immunity. Paul's deal is that no first-degree murder. That's his deal. Paul is highly motivated to tell you the story that will keep him from getting that charge. And he did. Read his own text. Paul's the one who's talking about, I wish I could beat him up. I've never wanted to beat up somebody more in my life. Paul's the one who kicked in the door. Paul's the tormentor. Paul is the guy who's not only tormenting his brother, he's also enjoying it. And Paul is motivated to say now, and Paul testified against his mom. Paul tortured his brother. That's who Paul is. And Paul ain't going to be charged with first-degree murder. I don't care what the deal is. I think that should be obvious. So you got the two bigs. You've got these text messages that give you a false and misleading representation of what people are thinking. You've got Paul sitting here talking for his life, talking his butt off. He's trying to get out from under. In fact, at one point I asked him, isn't it true you wrote a letter to your mom saying you wish it just ended all so you could get out of this thing? And he said, yes, I did. That's who Paul is. Paul's also the nexus of information for my client. Yes, my client, he told my client one time that he thinks he's thin, we should feed him, but on another time, in fact, right before his death, Paul says, no, he's fine. Paul is the nexus of information. If you have those cameras, these security cameras in your home, you recognize those are great devices, and generally speaking, they do the job. But the kind of detail, the kind of vision that you need, you really need Paul there to augment that so that you get a full picture of what's going on. And Paul was there, and he was providing for my client. Third factor. I got a client that forgot everything. She forgot her name, if you were asking. She forgot everything, let's face it. Okay. When Mr. Roberts was giving his open, and quite frankly, I've been doing this for 35 years. That's one of the finest openings I've ever heard. It was just wonderful. It was those kinds of things that lawyers appreciate because it was so well crafted, so well delivered. And he even gave you some poetry, and I'm no poet. I can't match that. I look for stuff, but I can't find anything like he did. It was just a wonderful opening. What I got for you is a little bit of physics. 20 years ago, 30 maybe, I read that the smallest bit of matter theoretically possible to exist in the universe would be about 2/100,000th of a billionth of a millimeter. And it would be a thing. It'd be two-dimensional. It would be a thing that's so high energy that it could only exist for a brief moment in time. It exists and it pops out of existence again. I read that 30 years ago. I couldn't tell you the first name or last name of any people in this panel. I know. It's not because it's not important. It's because that's the way memory works. I couldn't tell. That's the way memory works. It is not a logical construct where you remember things that you're supposed to, but you can forget the things you don't. Memory remembers what it wants to remember. Now you can do techniques and training and if something say is say someone that causes a lot of adrenaline or something that burns the memory into you, you remember that. You remember when your child was born because that's the sort of situation it is. But otherwise, memory has its own mind and it remembers what it wants and it forgets what it wants. And to say, well, she didn't remember these things. Well, yeah, she probably doesn't. You know, we talked about, and to use Mr. Roberts' example, at one moment my client is talking about getting fries for the younger child, but getting hot sauce for the older child. And he talks about compartmentalizing. The brain is a sophisticated organism, it's a sophisticated panel. It will organize things according to whatever parameters that are there, but it will separate things out. And it is my argument. The argument we make from the very beginning is that while part of her knew she was punishing this boy, none of her knew that she was hurting him. I understand. There's two possibilities. One, she's exactly what Mr. Roberts said, and that's evil. That's evil. Or the other possibility is there's something going on, and she doesn't understand. She didn't understand, despite all the intelligence, she didn't understand the ultimate consequence of those individual acts of punishment. The accumulated force and power and weight of those individual acts of punishment. She didn't understand it. She didn't see it. I don't know how that could be. But to be honest with you, that's what makes sense. It makes sense because this is her son. And and she raised other children, her own flesh and blood. She raised them and didn't do this sorts of things to them. Something was going on where she didn't understand it. This child was probably the highest needs. She didn't understand it. And her personal situation also makes a difference. Look, she took this child in when she wasn't supposed to have him because there was no other choice. So she did it. She raised another child. Paul has special. Paul's 20 years old and living at home with mom and working minimum wage. This is what Paul's doing. She has other child, and she has the demands of judges and lawyers, and she has the demands of education and the demands of ambitions, and her husband gets a stroke. These all make a difference. That's what I'm talking about context. Giving 4 slices of bread with hot sauce on it doesn't talk about, she's thinking about her husband. The impact is how she's going to pay the rent. How she's going to get to work tomorrow. There's no gas in the car. These are all things that are going. There isn't a situation where she's sitting there just thinking about this one problem. She has too many problems to think about one. She's thinking about them all at a time. And pressure busts a pipe. It was too much. She didn't hate her child. That's what it would have taken to knowingly do this to your child. She would have to hate him. A child makes you angry. A child makes you frustrated. A child makes you tired. A child is willful. And this is and she wasn't able to cope with it. And she didn't add it up. The bread plus the water plus the standing against the wall. She didn't add it up. And the mind is a powerful thing. She didn't see what we all saw. But let me, so this woman who doesn't love her son, according to the people, comes into a room and she says, Timothy, please, no. Wake up. Come on, buddy. No, 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 no. This can't happen. Is he okay? Is he okay? He's not stiff. Please, baby, come on. Open his jaw for me. Please, come on. Come on, buddy. You're okay. Come on, buddy. Come on, Timothy. I don't understand. To which Paul says, I don't either. Come on, buddy. Come on, sweetie. Come on, buddy. Come back to us. Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy. Come on. Does she get scared or not? Yep. And lie to please. Hell yeah. She does. A lot. Because like Paul, she can see it now. Now, she doesn't have to do the math. The math is the body of her dead son. And they can both see it now. But as they were going through it, folks, they didn't see it. I don't think at the moment that they find the body and they says, I don't understand, and Paul says, I don't either. They were faking it for the camera or faking it for the police. They've forgotten all about the damn camera. They said those things because that was true. It's what you do in those moments of high stress. It's true. I didn't get this. I didn't see this coming. How could you not? They didn't. They didn't see it. Neither one of them saw it. Paul talked about, in his few moments of clarity, I love my brother. I wish it was me instead of him. And that's how, did he start feeling that way afterward, or did he feel that way at the time? If he felt that way at the time, how could he do these things? Because he didn't know he was doing these things. You see where I'm going? How could he feel? I repeat, he said he'd give his life for his brother if he could. Question is, did he feel that way at the time he was doing these things to him? Well, how could he do those things to him if he felt that way? Because they didn't see it. These people committed manslaughter. That's what they did. They caused this boy's death, but they didn't intend to. That's simply it. We're asking that you, when you do your deliberations, that you consider that. I understand those pictures look like. I understand what they look like. I understand that everybody here wants justice for Timothy. I get that too. Justice is the conviction of a person for what they did, not for what they made us angry about, not what they made us sick about, not what they made us want to jump over that railing and take care of this thing ourselves. That's not what justice is. Justice is, this is what you did, and this is what you paid for. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Because I do bear the burden of proof in this case, I do get one more opportunity to address you. And I want to start by thanking Mr. Johnson for his compliments here. We tried a number of cases together over the years, and it's always, quite frankly, it's always a pleasure to work with Mr. Johnson. And I think a lot of folks are probably confused sometimes when they see a relationship, a good relationship between both sides. And what I always tell people is this is an adversarial system by its nature, but that doesn't mean that the parties necessarily have to be adversaries. We don't have to agree on everything, and ultimately, that's why you folks are here.
Let's start with Mr. Johnson's comments about the text messages and how text messages don't show all of what a person is doing. He's right. They don't show all of what a person is doing or necessarily even what a person is thinking. But they do offer a window into the insight of what a person is thinking about. They do offer a window into what a person is telling somebody else to do or telling somebody else to say. So the fact that there are that binder full of text messages over a 6-month period about what to do to punish Timothy offers you a window into the inside of the defendant. But actions are what speaks louder than words here. Because everything that she talked about, everything that she wanted to have done, with the exception of one thing, so out of bounds, I can't even believe she posed it, but everything that she wanted to have done was done. That's not text messages, that's her actions. Her actions, not her text messages, caused Timothy's death. Her actions, not her text messages, caused Timothy to suffer serious emotional, mental, and physical harm that resulted in his death. Withhold the food. Give him bread with hot sauce. Put him in an ice bath. Make sure he doesn't sleep. Make sure all the food is locked up. Make him run the stairs. It goes on and on and on and on. Her actions speak louder than her words. Mr. Johnson talked to you about Paul. And I'll leave you to your recollection of what Paul's deal was, but Mr. Johnson summarized it fairly well. There is not an agreement in place that Paul is not charged with murder in this case. Ultimately, that's a decision that our office gets to make. So he wants you to look at Paul's testimony through that lens. Go ahead. Please do. What did Paul lie about? What did Paul get on the stand and tell you that wasn't true? What did Paul get up there and describe what he had done to Timothy at Shanda's direction that didn't happen? Nothing. Mr. Johnson cited nothing for you to look at in Paul's testimony that wasn't true. And he can't, because everything Paul talked about that he did is verified by the text messages. Every single one of them. And again, the only thing he didn't do, and he's the one that drew the line, the only thing he didn't do was when the day before her child dies, as she's looking at him in an ice bath for hours upon end, and says, hey, crazy idea. What would it feel like if hot sauce was poured on your private parts? I'm not saying touch him there or anything, but what do you think? Are you kidding me? That's why I said yesterday, did you even need to ask that question? What do you think? That's what's in her mind. That's how you determine what her intent is. That's what the instructions are going to tell you to do. This isn't a tiny glimpse of her. This isn't a tiny moment in time, and you can't assume that that's what she is. You can assume that's what she has done for the last 6 months. Because that's what this is about. That's what these text messages are about. Every single one of them. Right up until the very end. The last thing she says to Paul before they find Timothy that next morning is, I had to drag him back into the small room. He decided to go big or go home today. The last thing she says to her child, you don't have to breathe with your mouth open, dummy. Her actions, what makes her guilty? The text messages are just evidence to support the actions that she took. Paul aided and abetted in the death of his brother. There's no question about that. He did these things. But you saw Paul. You heard him talk about what limitations he has. You heard him talk about what type of person he was. But you know what Paul is not? Paul is not Timothy's father. Paul is not the person charged with the care and custody and love of his brother. He can love him. And as he said, I guess I didn't love him enough. It's up to you whether you believe that was genuine or not, but even if you believe it wasn't, even if you believe his emotion about this and his remorse about this is fake, he didn't lie about anything else. It's all proven. And let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that Paul is the mastermind behind all of this. Paul's responsible for everything. Why do you leave him alone with them? If you're the parent, why are you leaving your child alone with somebody who's this monstrous? It doesn't make any sense. The reason Paul is left to watch over him is because Shanda can manipulate Paul into doing the things that she needs to have done. She knew she had somebody in Paul that would carry out her instructions implicitly. I'm glad she stopped Paul from being physical with Timothy. I am. I appreciate that the one thing he did not actually have to suffer as a result of this were beatings. But everything else was just to isolate Timothy from the world. Look at the lengths she went to make sure that the grandmother of the youngest child couldn't come to the home, to the point where she's tracking her on her phone when she's driving home from work. Now, I don't like it when my in-laws come over and my house is dirty, but I'm not looking at my phone to see when they're going to get here or make sure I meet them outside so they don't come inside. You only do that because you're trying to hide something. What is she trying to hide? She's trying to hide Timothy. Because anybody that would have seen Timothy, anybody that looked at that child would have known what was going on. And she couldn't have that. And her mind is working well enough to know, I can't have people seeing Timothy. I can't have photographs of Timothy. I need to have Paul do these things. I need to make sure that Timothy doesn't get to go outside. Did you hear her say anything about anywhere that Timothy got to go? The closest she came to saying, well, the backyard is kind of open and you can kind of see in the backyard. She talked about taking him to Craig's Cruisers or taking him to a movie or taking him to a restaurant, any of that stuff? No. Timothy was a prisoner, treated lower than a human, treated lower than an animal in his own home. A prisoner in his own home. The 911 call. She said all those things. You heard all those things. I'll leave it to you to determine whether or not the emotion that she's displaying there was real. Sounds cold. Yeah, she's upset. She's upset that he's dead. But if you're so worried, if you're so concerned, if you're so alarmed, if you care so much about this person, why do you wait 18 minutes to call 911? Why, when your son, who's 20 years old, says to you, I think we need to call an ambulance, or should we call an ambulance? You say, no, not yet. Not yet? Not yet? When? When you're done making it sure, like, you're covering up as much evidence as possible? Because that's when. Because then it becomes a matter of making sure he's got pants on and put your belt on to make sure he looks, that he's looked this way. Make sure we tell him he was on a hunger strike. And now I guess we'll have to call 911. Not yet. Don't call 911 yet. What are you waiting for? Got to get the story straight. Guess I'm going to be late for work. You heard Paul up here yesterday say that he'd trade places with Timothy if he could. Did you hear the defendant say that? No. Mr. Johnson said she had so many things on her mind. It was just, this was just one thing too many. He's right. Timothy was the one thing too many. Timothy was too much for her. And as a result, she decided she wasn't going to lose this fight. Timothy was too much for her to handle, but she was going to win. And again, don't take my word for it. February 16th, 5 months before Timothy dies. I may need some help with it, but I'm about to get a lock for the pantry door. Remember what you said about the pantry? And a lock for the fridge and both freezers, and then we won't leave any food out in those areas, and he won't have access to unlock those. This is supposedly February 14th. This is when he's on a hunger strike because of Adam's stroke, right? So your child's on a hunger strike and you're locking away the food? Paul's response, okay. If you disagree, please say so, but he is not going to win this. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. She was bound and determined that she was going to win. Timothy was no longer a human to her. Timothy was something even below the dogs that she trained, but she was going to make sure that she won this fight. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now up to you to send a message to her that she lost this fight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Yes. Good. Okay. Well, Mr. Is that can you use the restroom?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. All right. Members of the jury, the evidence and the arguments in this case have...
So, credit to prosecutor there. I have never sat so quiet in my entire life during a closing argument by a prosecutor. Yeah, that was heavy stuff. I hate it. I hate it all. We're not going to listen to jury instructions. We'll go to the verdict here in just 1 second. The whole thing about text messages, I agreed with the defense attorney when he said that, because prosecutors generally cherry pick them, and I don't like that. That's can be misleading. However, I don't think these fall into that category. And if you listened to her and everything that she did, even when Timothy is lying there dead on the floor, she tells Paul, she directed Paul. Paul did everything. She would just be the one to tell him to do it. But even when he was lying there on the floor and we were listening to the audio from the video they were playing, Paul opened his jaw, made Paul do it. The night before, when the lieutenant was talking about the video that the camera, we didn't see it, they didn't play it or anything. When she trained Great Danes, but she had a Great Dane was as a service dog too for her, of course. She tells the dog to lick Timothy's face. She doesn't really ever touch him or want anything to, her hands, I think in her mind, maybe her hands were clean because she didn't actually do it. She just directed, whether it's her dog, Paul, whatever. The only thing I'll give the defense attorney is I think he kind of made a good argument for manslaughter, maybe Paul, probably in Paul's case, if they do end up charging him with more than child abuse. Because for the first degree unaliving, whatever, they have to prove intent. That's why he was really kind of on that. And most of the time, if somebody unfortunately beats a child to death or beats somebody to death or what have you, I didn't mean to, I didn't know, it was a moment. But this took months and months and months. And I don't care how busy you are, look at your freaking child. You had him in your hands. It may have been too late at that point anyway, just when she was getting him out of the bathtub. I don't know if they could have saved him. But he brought up the point. So Timothy lived with his father in Oklahoma, and we don't know why, but it was brought up in court outside of the presence of the jury. She actually was not allowed to have custody of Timothy. She was allowed supervised visitations, but he was not to be with her. So she did something to get that to happen. Timothy obviously was a hard child. The father calls her and says, you take him or I'm going to put him out. He's going to go into, I'm going to give him to CPS. Would have been a better choice. And I don't say that one lightly because we've heard horror stories there as well. So he was a hard child, and obviously neither one of them wanted to deal with him. But yeah, so whatever she did that made a judge say, yeah, you cannot have this, you cannot have custody of him, and you cannot visit him without, you have to be supervised. I wish we would have been able to hear that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I was surprised that the defense attorney brought it up. I mean, they did hear part of it. She's the one that started going into it, and the judge stopped it, and they did a sidebar, and then was told that we're not talking about that. So it looks like they maybe deliberated for about an hour. Not long. Oh, hang on. Don't come in. Stop it. Maybe long enough to fill out the forms, I guess. I don't know. But alrighty, here it is. Come on. That's not me. Come on, people. Put it in focus here.
All right, we are back on the record in file 23110 FC, People versus Shanda Vander Ark. The court has been informed the jury has reached a verdict. Mr. Johnson, Ms. Vander Ark is not present. My understanding is you had an opportunity to speak with her and discuss her presence today. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor. That's where I've been since our last adjournment. So I just came up with her. She's declined to join us for this portion of the trial.
Okay. During the break, I anticipated that, and I did a little case law research. There is no law in the state of Michigan at this time that requires the defendant to be present for the verdict. There is a law that does require her to be here for sentencing and hear the victims' statements, but so the court was essentially left with a choice of forcibly compelling her to be here, which could cause her to, I don't know, could cause further issues. We have deputies that certainly, if I order them to do that, they would do that, but I don't want to put them in a position of harm if something happens, and I don't think that's appropriate. So I'm not going to do that, and again, there is no law that requires her to do that. So, Mr. Roberts, anything for the record before we bring the jury out?
Your Honor, I would concur with the court's research here. I think that we're all aware that there was a law recently passed that requires the defendant to be present for at least the victim impact portion of sentencing, and I agree. I don't think there's anything that requires her to be here. So pursuant to the written stipulation that she has already filed and has been witnessed and updated by Mr. Johnson as we go here, I think we can proceed without her presence.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Johnson, before we leave the period?
No,
I think
sir.
she's a coward.
Please rise.
Absolute coward. Yeah, it makes me so angry, Kim, that she just did that.
You may be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the court has been informed that you have reached a verdict. If that is true, I'd have the foreman please rise and give the verdict form to Mr. Weaver, the bailiff. All right, thank you, Mr. Weaver. Can the foreperson please rise and announce the verdict?
She has to read the whole thing, or?
Typically, there's no set way to do it, but typically you could say in the people of the state of Michigan versus, and then on one count, what the verdict is, and count two.
I think they kind of would have
Of the
did
United
this.
States versus Shanda Vander Ark, count
I
one.
think you mean people of the state of Michigan, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I apologize.
Okay, all right, that's
The
okay.
people of the state of Michigan versus Shanda Vander Ark, count one, charging open murder involving the death of Timothy Ferguson. We find her guilty of first-degree felony murder. Count two, first-degree child abuse. We find her guilty of first-degree child abuse.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Court will record the verdict for the record. Mr. Johnson, would you like the jury polled?
Please,
All right. All right, juror number two, please
absolutely.
rise.
Good.
Is that your verdict?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Good,
Juror
good.
number four, is that your verdict? Okay, and you don't have to say, you can say yes or no. So, juror number, actually, that was juror number four. Juror number five, is that your verdict?
Yes.
All right, you can sit down. Juror number six, please rise. Is that your verdict?
Yes, sir.
All right, juror number seven, is that your verdict?
Yes.
All right, juror number 8, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 9, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 10, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 11, is that your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 12, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 13, is that your verdict?
Yes.
And juror number 14, is that your verdict?
Yes.
All right. So with that being said, again, the court will record the verdict for the
Sound like
record.
it was pretty
Ladies and
evenly
gentlemen,
split
I thank you for your service.
between men and women.
This was an incredibly
more
difficult
women.
case. Now, you know, when the attorneys were discussing what the evidence would be, I think you understand what we were talking about. Unfortunately, now, it was not for the faint of heart, and certainly those of you who did this, unfortunately, it's unfortunate that you will not get those images out of your mind. I won't. But somebody had to do it, and I'm glad that you were willing to do that. You are discharged of service at this time. You are free to talk to anyone you wish about this, or you don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to, but you're free. The restriction regarding news reports, you can do anything you want. You can talk to anyone you want at this point going forward. So again, thank you for your service, and you are excused. Mr. Weaver, please rise.
I really want to know if he's going to set sentencing because I'm writing it down. I hope they show it. It's got to be quick if they do it because these guys are going to cut it off. But yeah, I cannot believe that she did. I mean, I guess I should. I should not be surprised that she did not. She was sick, could not be here today.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes,
you
Your
have a
Honor,
seat.
we officially moved to revoke bond. I don't believe bond has been posted, and I don't know if it was set, but in light of the conviction, I think the court is required to revoke bond.
Okay, Mr. Johnson.
I don't know if she ever had bond, but
I don't know either, but certainly, given the nature of the crime, the court is going to revoke bond.
He's like,
We
nah,
are going
whatever.
to, schedule sentencing for January 29th, 2024 at 8:30 a.m. The court's going to refer the matter to state probation for preparation of a pre-sentence report. And again, bond is revoked at this time. Anything else for the record, Mr. Roberts?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Johnson?
no, sir, thank you.
Gentlemen, I can't say enough. You were very professional. I think you did both did an incredibly good job, and certainly, again, professional. And I certainly appreciate that. We were very efficient, and I think that's important. So thank you very much, and have a good afternoon, have a good night, and have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah, we're adjourned.
Well, they got it right, in my opinion. I thought they might consider manslaughter, but as short time as they were back there, I don't believe that to be the case at all. They were not back there long at all. I think that video, if anybody was on the fence, did just, yeah, that's it. You could tell even the judge was disturbed by that because he was kind of having trouble, going, well, that's what we need to do. We need to do closings. He's like, you don't. I could send them out right now. You'd be okay. But I don't know if they'll, Paul maybe is going to plead guilty to his one charge right now. Surely this prosecutor's not going to go back and charge him with first degree. I hope not. He's charged with first degree child abuse. They would not let anybody state how long that sentence can be, so I have no idea. But I do think he was sincere on the stand. You could tell it was bothering him. You could tell, like, everything that he now can look back and see, he knows, he understands. Watching her on the stand, no. She tried to cry at least twice. There wasn't a tear. Now, I was watching on my big monitor next to me, like, they were close up on her at some point. Not a drop. Not one. Her eyes might get a little bit watery, but nothing fell out of her. Nothing fell. Nothing. I'd be bawling my eyes out. When the medical examiner was up there showing his pictures and talking about how bad he looked, she sat there stone-faced. She's cold. I would have been just a puddle, knowing that's my child and I did it. And she had nothing. Nothing. And he's right. When he said it's all about her, it's all about her. I get it. She went through a stressful time in her life. Her husband had a stroke. He had to move out. She was the only one providing. Then Paul starts working. He's helping, but she's just still, Paul, do this. Paul, do this. Everything to Timothy. Paul, you got to watch him. It's your fault if he's doing nothing. At one point, she even threatened Paul, if this happens, it's not going to be good for either one of you when I get home. That was one message that we saw. So who knows how many more are in those binders, because he's got a big binder and a little binder, just like he said. And who knows how much that kid was threatened. Because the defense said, well, you left the home. Why didn't you, basically, why didn't you tell anybody? Well, you hear stories of kids that are brought up in abusive homes all the time that don't tell. Even when they have the chance. I was watching a story the other night. Her parents beat her from head to toe because she didn't sit still in church. And it happened every single time they left church, no matter what. Her grandparents called CPS. The officers asked to see her, they wanted to see her body, like her bruising. And she said, I was so conditioned to think that that's what was supposed to happen. I told them nothing happened. So, but now she knows, you can see Paul's mind coming. It's coming in there. He's wrapping his head around it. I don't think she'll ever take responsibility, ever, for this. And I don't know who's going to give the victim impact statements. There was no family members called. Paul's in jail. So I don't know. But he said she has to be there. So I don't know. She has sisters that she even by her own admission hasn't talked to in years. So they can't call our 9-year-old son, I wouldn't think, because she sheltered him from that. It's in the text messages. Don't let him see. Keep him away. Don't let him see what's happening. So he now, if he was sitting in court, he knows what his 9-year-old brain will process of that. So I don't think it's him. Like he said, the grandparents, which are step grandparents, weren't allowed to be in the house. No mention of her parents. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I hope her Great Dane found a good home, because that just that pulls at my heartstrings for sure. I said yesterday she didn't deserve it. She didn't deserve a Great Dane. They're the sweetest dogs ever, loyal. I have 3, and she didn't deserve it. Not one second of their time. So that's it. I'm sorry. Today was super heavy, and I didn't think it was going to be this bad. This was the hardest day yet, for me, at least. The whole trial was really heavy, but this was the hardest. Hearing that video was hard. So I didn't really even put a warning up on this video, so I apologize if that caught you off guard, because it did me. So I'm gonna go. I have a very busy week ahead. I will probably not be back until after the new year, because Christmas is at my house this year, and I got a lot to do. My sister's supposed to come visit, and I'm not sure how long she is staying, so I'm going to spend some time with her. And I don't think anything's going to happen between now and after the new year anyway, so we'll see what good trials we have coming up, and go from there. And so whatever you guys are doing, celebrating, not celebrating, whatever, I hope you all have a good time. I hope you get to spend time with people that you love and care about, and get some maybe time to relax a little. Whatever you're doing, I just hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy the spirit of the season. So, and if you're somewhere warm, enjoy it for me, because it's cold here. It's snowing. I don't like it. So have good, whatever, Christmas, whatever you're doing, New Year's. Hope everything's good for you. 2024, I hope is good for all of you. And I will plan to see you on January 3rd, I believe is a Wednesday. So that will be my plan. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I will see you all, and I'll see y'all next year. Remember leaving school saying that? So I'll see you next year. Have a good day.